Hi, I'm Peter. I'm joined by my colleague Caroline. In today's webcast, Getting to Know iTunesU, we'll be helping you understand the true potential of iTunesU and explore some of the powerful features of the iTunesU app. There is a lot of excitement about iPad in education. Many of you are probably thinking about how to use iPads with your students, or already deploying them in your classroom. iPad is amazing, with its thin and light design, all-day battery life and great price point. But what really makes the iPad the perfect fit for education is the breadth of learning content available and the engaging learning experiences it can create for your students. Content like apps that create new experiences with content that were never before possible. iBooks textbooks that allow students to touch and interact with the content as they learn. Or access the world's largest repository of free education media in the iTunesU catalogue. At Apple, we are very focused on how our products can make the difference in the lives of teachers and students. With iTunesU, we have created a new product that helps teachers curate all the great learning content for iPad and deliver it to their students in a single app. The iTunesU app allows your students to access all the great iTunesU content, including full courses, all in one place. The iTunesU app works on iPad, iPhone and iPod Touch, and it's a free download from the App Store. iTunesU courses are available via the iTunesU app and can include all your learning materials such as video, documents, apps and books. Students can view a course syllabus, read instructor posts and updates, and complete assignments. They can take notes in an assigned book, video and audio. And all of those notes, as well as general course notes, are going to be organized in one place, in the iTunesU app. Any instructor can build courses using an easy web-based tool called iTunesU Course Manager. Now I'd like to turn it over to Caroline, who will walk you through the features of a course using the iTunesU app.
Hi, I'm Caroline. Let's take a look at the iTunesU app in a little more detail. Your students' courses appear on this beautiful bookshelf. To open up a course, simply tap on it. When students open up a course from the iTunesU app, they'll see 4 tabs along the right-hand side: Info, Posts, Notes, and Materials. We're looking now at the Info tab, and there are several pages here: Overview, Instructor, and Outline. On the Overview page, it's just basic information about the course. The Instructor page tells students about the instructor of the course. And the Outline page gives students a list of the major topics and subtopics that will be covered throughout the course. Let's take a look at the Posts tab next. Posts allow you to communicate with your students, to contextualize your learning materials, and to give assignments. For in-session courses such as this course, there will be a due date for each assignment. Assignments can include many types of materials, such as videos, documents, and books. Each post is associated with a topic in the outline, which you can see displayed along the left-hand side. Students can look at all posts here, or they can tap on one of the specific outline topics to see just the posts associated with those topics. Students can also use a calendar to look at the posts in a date view. Posts can include assignments with different types of materials, which are just a tap away. This assignment is to read a chapter in an iBooks textbook. To read the book, all a student has to do is tap and it opens up in iBooks. And it will also open to the assigned chapter, so the student can begin reading right where they need to start. It's easy to highlight text and make notes as your students are reading, and have a great personalized experience as they're reading these amazing interactive textbooks for iPad. And when a student is done with the assignment, they can return to iTunesU and check it off to mark it complete. If students want to view all their assignments, they can tap Assignments. This shows them at a glance everything they have due. Posts can also include things like video, which students can open up and watch right from here. They simply tap on the video and it plays right here in the iTunesU app. As they're watching, students can take notes. The notes are saved to a specific time in the video for easy reference. Back in the iTunesU app, we're looking now at the Notes tab. All the notes students took in the video, in the book, along with any other general course notes they may have taken, are consolidated for easy reviewing right here in this Notes tab. The last tab is the Materials tab, which shows all the recommended materials for this course. Courses can include materials like audio and video files, presentations, documents, PDFs, books, apps, and web links. The iTunesU app also has a powerful search function, so students can search for topics within posts, assignments, notes, and materials, either within one course or across all of their courses. This particular course we've been looking at is a private course, which means that the instructor invited students to enroll. To invite students, you send out the course enroll code to the students, and then they can enter that into the iTunesU catalogue page on iPad. Once the student enters the enroll code, they'll get confirmation that they're enrolling in the course. And then the course will appear on the student's bookshelf with the pending enrolment sash on it, until the instructor approves their enrolment. When their enrolment is approved, the student will be able to fully access the course.
Now that you've seen the rich experience of taking a course on iPad with iTunesU, we wanted you to hear directly from instructors and educators who are already teaching courses using iTunesU. Each of them will share with you a little bit about their institutions, the technology they have in place, and then talk about both the teacher and student experience when teaching with iTunesU.
Okay, I'm Nicholas Watson. I'm the Strategic Projects Manager in Learning and Teaching Solutions at the Open University. Learning and Teaching Solutions is the Educational Media Production Centre of the OU, and I'm responsible for mobile learning production. And Liz Ellis, who's with me, is our lead editor on the work that we did on the iTunesU app and producing the courses there. And we're going to talk about our experiences in using that app, feeling our way into using that tool. And we're going to use two examples of our work. One is a course called Volcanoes, another is Environmental Ethics. We'll flip-flop when we talk about them between calling them courses and learning pathways. That's because when we came to the app, we felt that what Apple had done had create a narrative structure which allows you to take the student on a journey. It's got a beginning and a middle and an end, which iTunesU actually doesn't. That's simply an organizational metaphor derived from the record industry. But what they've done here is to create a really nice structure which you can exploit in a number of ways. Liz?
I think really the first thing to say is how much we like Course Manager. It's just a really brilliant bit of kit, to be honest. It's a simple, elegant way of organising learning materials. And especially when you're the OU and you have as much open educational resource sitting in iTunesU as we do, all of it culled from bigger modules, little bits here and little bits there, iTunesU Course Manager just gives you the opportunity then to go back in and go, how am I going to string all of this together in a lovely, coherent learning narrative?
I think you're right about that. What is nice about that tool is that it's a very, very simple structure, and its simplicity allows you to be quite complex and elegant in the way that you design those learning narratives. And I think in those examples, Volcanoes and Environmental Ethics, we've got two examples at different extremes of how malleable the tool is. Liz?
I agree, and it's a good example of the fact that informal learning doesn't have to be dumbed down learning, that something like Course Manager can support quite complex teaching ideas as long as you've planned it correctly, as long as you've thought all the way through to the end before you've even come back into Course Manager. So if you need to do your thinking offline, you need to do your planning offline, and then once you're ready, you can bring that back into Course Manager tool.
Some other thoughts that came to mind to us, we were just sort of gathering our reflections on what it was like for us entering this process of putting together courses. And obviously it may seem self-evident, but it's a truth. Planning is worth $1 million. Get yourself sorted out before you embark on using the tool. It's very tempting to jump in and start putting it together on the fly and putting your post in and your resources together and delivering it on the fly. If you do that, it's a way of getting in a tangle without trying very hard.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think the way we look at iTunesU Course Manager, it really is a microcosm of distance education, and we're fortunate that that's something that we have a lot of experience at. And so that we we move some of the skills that we have in that area over into this experience. And one of the main ways you can see that happening is through what we call the learning outcomes. Each one of our courses has learning outcomes, and they vary depending on how long the actual course is. But generally, you can see that there's one learning outcome per post. And that is a way of not only for, once it's alive and available to your students, it's a way for not only them to understand, okay, this is what I need to achieve by the end, this is what I need to understand by the end. It also gives you good guidance in, this is what I'm planning for them to achieve, this is what I'm planning for them to learn. And it allows you to constantly check back with yourself and go, okay, have I picked the right resources? Have I asked the right questions? Do I understand what's going on? And will my student understand what's going on? And the planning gives you that opportunity. It gives you that opportunity to test the resources you've chosen, evaluate the resources you've chosen. And also, if you're then given the choice between a number of different learning materials, you can ask yourself, is this really the best one for this particular post?
I'd agree with Liz about that. When we first came across the tool and we realised that actually that tool, that shape, spoke to the strengths that we have as a distance learning institution. Part of our proposition is that you've got to get yourself into the mind of the remote student. You've got to be able to appreciate and understand what that experience is like for them, sitting remotely at a desk, going through that material that you've constructed for them, trying to think through how that is going to work. And this tool allows you to do that without very much difficulty at all. So really, we would consider it as a microcosm of distance education. And a trick, I think, if you're more accustomed to, as an educator, if you're more accustomed to delivering your learning in a face-to-face context, and this is a bit of a leap for you, that's the first task. Put yourself in the mind of that remote student and make sure that they're supported along the way, and that the way that you describe and support the resources that you're handing out through the posts is adequate. And go back, rework it, rethink it before you release it, so that people aren't left stranded high and dry, or, worse, misunderstanding what your intention was. Probably a good time to sort of think in a bit more detail about post and activities. The post and activities, that string of pearls approach that it gives you is a very, very simple tool, but can be used in a very sophisticated way. Liz, do you want to talk about the particular example of environmental ethics?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think environmental ethics is a really good example of trying to cover quite a big topic, quite a topical topic, come to that, with the resources that you have available. And it's also a good example of how those posts and how those activities can work for you. Environmental ethics moves through a variety of different faculties. So it's going from social science, it's going to science, it's got a little bit of philosophy in there as well, and a little bit of ethics, all at very different levels, some first year level, some postgraduate level. And the challenge there is to go, these are excellent resources, and together they'll make an excellent narrative, and it'll be something valuable for the student to come away with. But how do I bring these together, and how do I make it so that the student feels that they're being talked to, and that they feel supported? And really, right there is the virtue of this. Is because there is no direct dialogue with the students, your posts are your dialogue. Your post is where all your teaching is, but more importantly, your post is where you're able to talk most directly to the student. And we do that in a number of different ways. Some of them being how we handle questions. We have different types of questions that we use to great effect in our main teaching modules. We do things like asking open questions, which environmental ethics is a good example of, because those are slightly more pertinent to your humanities topics, where you can ask open questions, reflective questions. Why do you think? How do you think? Reflect on, consider. And then where things are slightly more specific, slightly more scientifically based, and that's in particular for a course like volcanoes, it really is more closed. So explain why. Did you see that, this has occurred in this particular reading? Why did it happen, or how did it happen, etc. So student engagement is one really important way of using posts to your advantage. The other two important points is really that it allows you to manage the junctions in the actual learning materials that you're using, and also that it's a method of guiding and directing the student. If I tackle guiding and directing first, because you have essentially a list of different types of resources, so say you have a string of 5 or 6 audio podcasts, rather than letting the student just tackle them ad hoc, you can use the post to instruct them to say, no, I want you to do them in this particular order in order to facilitate what they're learning, in order to manage what they're learning, so that you know that by the time they're moving on to the next post, they've got a good grounding of what they need to understand. And then managing junctions in the narrative, for instance, in a course like Volcanoes, where we know that there are pre-existing gaps in the resources that we're using because of the nature of the open educational resource, we can manage those junctions in the post by writing our way out of trouble, by explaining something that either was assumed knowledge in the original module and is therefore assumed knowledge in the particular resource that you're using, or just to say, oh, by the way, this is something that we actually haven't covered yet, but I think you should be able to understand this if we tell you this.
I think that's a really good way of putting it, writing your way out of trouble, because we are using open educational resources. They are found objects, yes, and you have to treat them as found objects. And if you are constructing a narrative, you're constructing a learning journey with particular points and outcomes that you want to make, you have to use the post in that setting. You have to use the post to write yourself out of trouble.
I guess what I would say there is that actually it's not to fear the fact that you have to write your way out of trouble. Actually, sometimes writing your way out of trouble is the most fun. Volcanoes was a struggle, but it was actually also pretty fun.
That's right. So Liz and I spent many hours sweating over that particular learning pathway. The other thing that we've done or had the opportunity to do in creating our courses, Learning Pathways, is use a diversity of resources. And it makes the learning experience for that remote student much richer if they're moving between video, audio, text, perhaps even a short book, a discourse on the subject. It gives them a really rich warp and weft in that course, in that experience over the 10 hours. It's not a monolithic big lump of text which they have to wade their way through. And we like making that experience a rich and a diverse one as they go through.
There's several easy things, though, that we can do as educators to try and make sure that it doesn't become lumpen and completely just monolithic. And there are simple, tiny things like signposting, like using every post to tell the student, this is where you were, this is where you are, and this is where you're going. This is the order that I want you to tackle these resources in. And also simple consistent statements in the actual activity. Read this, watch this, reflect on this, listen to this. I think students identify with that consistency, and it gives them a sense of, I understand what's going on here and I'm going to be able to complete this, even though I'm doing it on my own time.
So in addition to those examples that we've featured, Volcanoes and environmental ethics, we just want to talk briefly about another pathway we created called ecosystems. And it has some distinctive characteristics, some of which relied on the way that we approached it and the way that we use video actually as a device for carrying the narrative along. But also it exploited some of the features of the app itself.
And built on what we had already decided on was a good approach to the original, our original pathways or courses. Ecosystems was one of the ones that we tried just after iTunesU Course Manager was launched. So we had already had the opportunity to really try out, have a feel for what the shorter courses were going to be like. Ecosystems is a timed course, so whereas all of our other courses tend to round out at about 10 hours, Ecosystems was released in a series over 6 weeks. So every Monday we were ready to release a new series of posts, and that gave us the opportunity to really let go and to really expand on some of the topics, whereas previously we might have gone, we're only going to be able to fit in one particular piece of material. Now this gives us the opportunity to really try out 3 or 4 different types of material. I think the reason Ecosystems worked for us was because we actually do have an immense representation in that particular field on iTunesU. So we already had a lot of content available to us. But in the same way, because it was so long, And because we needed to remind the student where they were every week, we then had to go, how are we going to identify with the student? How are we going to remind them of what they'd learned the previous week and what we want them to learn this week? And we settled on giving that particular course a face. So where some of our previous courses generally tend to be just have an institutional identity, they're just by the Open University. In this particular case, we decided to go with one of our academics, David Robinson, and he was able to be a face to the student. So he would come in via video, pre-recorded video, for every week and explain what was about to happen, remind you what had just happened before, and then sort of give you that push to carry on with the next bit of the course.
Of course, the opportunity with push notification is that it's starting to build a relationship with that dispersed group of learners. It's very powerful.
Absolutely. One thing I did think was really interesting about that is that we took the opportunity as well to introduce a hashtag to see what our students were thinking via Twitter. And the opinions were remarkably positive, which was great. People were definitely following the course all the way through to the end. But it also did offer us a couple of things that we hadn't necessarily thought about, which is quite important when you're thinking about a distance education student, which is they were doing things like saying, my Wi-Fi dropped out and I haven't been able to download all of the material. So that's something to think about, is the amount of material that you're releasing per week on a timed course, and having the student know that they need to download all of that before they get onto the train or the bus or whatever.
We're going to finish these sort of remarks by talking a bit about, give tips and pointers from our experiences of doing this, some things that have occurred to us, which I think might be helpful to pass on. It
seems like such a tiny thing, but be consistent. It's the easiest way to help your student know where they are and what they're about. And it's everything from always starting with learning outcomes. It could be as simple as always having 10 steps or posts. It could be something as simple as having the same way of introducing each post. It could be as simple as a way of introducing questions or your activities. But that consistency encourages the student, especially if they're doing more than one of your courses at a time.
The other thing is to make sure of the quality of the resources that you're going to use. There's so much stuff out there. You've got to make sure that it's right, it's academically secure, that you're not sending people down the wrong way. We almost exclusively used our own open educational resources. We actually have quite a large bank of resources which are openly available to anybody to use if you come to us. And we restricted ourselves to using those materials, and then we could be sure of the educational and production quality of the material.
Always remember where your remote student is. They're not necessarily sitting at a desk. They're not even necessarily sitting in front of the television on a weeknight. They could be on a bus. They could be on a train. They could be sitting on a bench in the park in English drizzle. But either way, you need to remember that they're not necessarily chained to their computer. So think about that as you're thinking about everything from your introduction to the type of resources that you're going to use, the type of questions you need to ask them. Just keep that remote student in mind.
And don't leave the student hanging. When you get to the end of the course, point them somewhere useful, either into further resources that you're providing or into something that you've found. But don't leave them with the sense that that's the end of it, because it is part of a longer, wider journey.
And finally, use the media resources for what it's best at. If you are faced between a piece of text and a video, take a really good, long, hard look at the types of resources that you have available and go, this is what is going to be best at teaching the student. This is going to get my message across most carefully. And in a similar way, when you're thinking about the media, how are you going to support that media in the post? Do you need to put in a PDF transcript? Do you need to offer a bit of guidance? But choose the best possible media for that particular question.
And that's it. Liz and I have really enjoyed the experience. We were really appreciative of the opportunity to get in on the early stages of using this tool, and we found it thoroughly rewarding. Hope you enjoy it as much as we have.
Teachers are doing incredible things with iTunesU courses. We would encourage you to go to the iTunesU app from your iPad and download and explore these courses. These are great examples created by teachers who are already teaching courses using iTunesU, and will allow you to see what's possible as you begin to think of ways you can teach courses using iTunesU. All the courses that you subscribe with iTunesU will appear on this beautiful bookshelf alongside their iTunesU collections. And when you and your students want to discover new courses, simply tap on Catalogue to browse over 1,500 courses and other great content that's available today. We want to thank you for your time today and encourage you again to go to apple.com/iTunesU so you can sign up to begin creating your own courses, download and start to explore some of these courses, and see the power of teaching and learning with iPad. We look forward to seeing you again on Webcast number 2, where we will take you through the process of creating a course using iTunesU Course Manager. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Liz and Nick. That was very interesting and gave us a good insight on how to use iTunesU courses and what initial thoughts you should have when you plan to use iTunesU courses. So we had a number of questions coming in from the audience. Thanks for that. If you still have any questions, so please keep on sending them through. Unfortunately, we don't have too much time to answer every question, but please keep on sending them in if you want. So let's jump straight into the first question then. So could I also use iTunesU app in a desktop computer, lab or Mac in addition to iPad, iPhone or iPod Touch? So yes, you can to some extent, but just to clarify, to get the best experience and to use all the features of the iTunesU or of iTunesU courses, basically, you should use the iTunesU app on an iPad. So let's be honest, and especially if you want to have full support for all the content available, you should use it on an iPad, because as you can include, for example, iBooks Author multi-touch books, or you can include apps into your course, which mean basically that you should be using that on an iPad. But yes, on a Mac or on a PC, you can browse through the courses and you can basically see the content, but you cannot access any content available. So you might only be able to, for example, look at the videos or audio or PDF files available. So what is the difference between an iTunesU collection and the courses and materials that are offered in the iTunesU catalog? So as you might know, there is a public facing side of iTunesU. So this is where all the big universities and some schools, and you also have museums and other organizations where they're posting content on iTunesU. And there's two ways basically to organize content. So one is I would say the classical way, which is basically to put the content into a collection. So this is a sort of a repository, digital repository for audio, video, and PDF content. We also support EPUB here. And then the second thing is to use Course Manager and basically put the content in a course, as we have seen in the presentations today. And so there's a subtle difference between those two, obviously. So the first one is, again, just a repository of the digital content of the individual items. And the second one, you could technically also just put the content in there, your assets. But the interesting thing is obviously to put a learning path through those objects in order to let the student know what you have intended when they, for example, watching a video, or you can point them to specific things when they're reading a text, etc., etc. Then there's a few questions on support of different languages. So we do support majority of all Western European languages. Also special character sets such as Greek should be supported. Arabic as well. I mean, out of the box, iOS 6 should support Arabic, so the iTunesU app does support that. And if you do have material in, for example, Arabic, that should be supported. Again, I'm saying should be because I myself haven't tried it, but according to the information I have, this should be supported. The next question is Course Manager accessible through a Windows PC? So it is accessible, as I said. Again, Course Manager is the tool to build your course, and so all you need is actually a browser to access Course Manager. So, and as I said, again, to access the course itself, you should use an iPad or If you just want to browse through the course, you can use the iTunes client on a Mac or a PC. When will iTunes U be available to museums or charities? So we do already offer a way for museums or charitable organizations to offer content through iTunes U. There's a section on iTunes U which is called Beyond Campus, and you find a few institutions there already, like we have, for example, the Royal Opera House here in London, or the Tate, the V&A Museum. So we have a few providers already there which fall right into that category. If you are interested as a museum or charitable trust to join iTunes U with a public site, then please do apply or drop us a note at iTunesU at euro.apple.com. Next question, I have a laptop, can I access this iTunes U on it? Again, if it's a Mac or a PC, if you have iTunes installed, you should be able to access iTunes U. You can browse the catalog, you should be able to access most of the content, unless, again, it's an app or, for example, a multi-touch book built with iBooks Author. What is more popular, collections or courses? Well, it's a very tricky question, I would say. You can't really distinguish, I would not distinguish between popularity. I think it's rather the question of what is more applicable, I would say. So if you just want to give your users a way to access your digital content, then maybe the collections are a better way of doing that, because sometimes it's easier to just, for example, especially if you have an existing RSS feed, to just use that and publish it through iTunes U as a collection. But if you want the users or students to have a more interactive experience with the content and to guide them through the digital content, then courses would be obviously the better way of doing that. But again, I would not say one is more popular than the other. Yeah. Can this integrate it into a VLE? So first of all, we are not a VLE. We are more like a content distribution engine or content platform. So this is a way to distribute your digital content to the end user. But everything you see inside iTunes U, so any, for example, collection or any course, or even the assets within a course or collection, are directly accessible through an HTML link. So anything which you can find on iTunes U is, again, directly accessible through an HTML link, and this link can then be added into your existing VLE if you would want to do so. So again, there's no direct APIs or interfaces to a VLE, but we have seen institutions using those HTML links in order to feed that back into their VLE or course management systems. Can I stream iTunes U content through Apple TV? Yes, you can. So if you have, for example, if you use mirroring, you can just mirror the iTunes U app, or if you have a video playing, you can play that directly through an Apple TV. So that's possible. So here's a very good question on the storage limits. So can schools get more than 20 gigabytes? I've already got more than 50 gigabytes of lessons and exam review videos. So there's an interesting point on the fact that you can actually create courses as an individual. So you can sign up with your own Apple ID as an individual and create courses. If you do that, you have a limitation on the number of courses you create. Also the number of students which are able to subscribe to the course, plus there's a 20 gigabyte limit in terms of storage. If you need more storage, what you need to do is convince your institution, your school, your university to subscribe for, to apply for a public iTunes U site. And once your institution has a public iTunes U site, you can, as an individual, get affiliated to that site, and then those limits will disappear. So once you have an affiliated account with an institution, then there's no more limits in terms of number of courses, number of attendees, or the storage space. So next question, can you publish iTunes U material to be used by your students only and not the general public? So yes, there is a way to create private iTunesU courses. That's definitely possible. If you have a private iTunesU course, you would send around a link for people to subscribe to the course, and as an instructor or course creator, you can then approve or reject people to join the course. So you have a list of those people basically who want to join the course. And then the other extreme is then a public course, which you could put on your iTunesU public site, which then would mean that the course can be accessed by anyone, basically who find them in the directory. There's another question. There's a good question about copyright issues, and I guess this is not just in the field of arts; it's in general. So, and it's not only to do with images, but in general with digital content. We as Apple, we always tend to say that you should be very aware of what you're putting out there in a course or in a collection or anything on iTunesU. Please be aware of the rights you have in terms of using the material and also of distributing it. So this is something you should obviously look into. We cannot help you in that way, in any way for that, obviously. But if there's any copyright violations, we would obviously notify you. If we get notified that anyone is finding a course you have created which has a copyright issue, then we would notify you in order to take action on that. The next question is Course Manager available directly on the iPad rather than creating a course on my laptop? So at the moment you need to have a Mac or PC with a browser. Safari or Firefox or Chrome would work in order to create courses. You cannot create the course directly on the iPad at this point in time. Can you do assessment on iTunesU? At the moment you cannot. You have seen that this is more for self-paced learning. It's a self-paced learning tool, so there's no feedback loop built in at this point in time in the iTunesU app. I teach computer science, iOS development. I can deliver notes and videos on Course Manager, but there's no way for students to browse source code. Are there plans to support source code? That's a good question. I do not know if we would be supporting that in the near future. I think maybe there's a way of formatting the source code in a way in a Pages or Word document. I think that's the best answer I have here. So we do not directly support source code as a file format, I would say. Is there a way to reach your learners, such as distributing marks or posting notifications? As previously said, there's no feedback loop, so this would not work. Also, will this replace VLEs? No, we're not intending to replace any VLE. We do see, however, people who are switching from a VLE to an iTunesU plus, for example, wiki or blog environment, because they think that they can do the same pretty much with iTunesU to distribute the content and then use a blog or wiki environment in order to foster the communities, basically. Is it possible to use Excel and Word programs to use them in a course? Is there any tool to be used with iPad? So again, as I have said, and as far as I remember, Excel and Word are not yet available on the iPad, but any app which you can find on the App Store can be part of a course. So if you want students to, for example, create or use a specific app, or that can be a paid or free app, within a course, then you can point them to the app in the App Store, and again, this will then be another asset in the materials list of your iTunesU course. So yes, this is possible. How is student material kept safe, and who has control of the material? So again, you control the material. Everything on iTunesU Course Manager is uploaded to Apple servers, so you have to be aware of that. But other than that, this is the way we protect the material. You can, if it's a private course, you can control who has access to the content. If it's a public course, then everything is public and anyone can access it. That's the way how it is. So there's another question, sorry. So where do you find the code to send to your students in order for them to sign up to the course? So again, either you send them the link, so you can, if it's a public course, you can easily send them the link. If it's a private course, inside iTunesU Course Manager, as the creator of the course, you can click on the share button, and then you will find the code basically which you need to send out, and so people can then enroll within the iTunesU app with this code. But sometimes it's just easier to send the HTML link so that people can find the course if it's a public course. How do you produce public rather than private courses, just like the OU? So yeah, again, there's a subtle difference. If you are an institution such as the Open University, or if you're a school, etc., you can apply for a so-called public site. You would then get access to PSM, which is Public Site Manager. So this is another tool. This is another backend tool which we offer to institutions, where they can build their iTunesU site. So something similar to the Open University or a lot of other institutions you find on iTunesU currently. So again, this is open to schools, universities, and museums or charitable trusts. Can you share the resources with your teachers via iTunes, via personal teacher's account? And then the question is cut off, unfortunately. So again, if you want to share your own course with a specific group of people, you can do that. If it's a private course, you can control who gets access to the course. So I think it's a yes, you can do that with a private course. Can we get an iTunesU area in the UK as a local authority working across many schools? Yes, we already have a few LAs are live on iTunesU, so they are posting content already. So if you are a local authority and you want to give access to your individual schools in your area to post content, then this is possible. Just go on apple.com/UK/education and you find the iTunesU area, and then at the very bottom of the page you can sign up as an institution. So this is definitely possible. Is any of this going, sorry, this is the next question, is any of this going to be related to primary education, age 4 to 11? So the tricky bit is that for majority of the functions you want to have an Apple ID, and Apple IDs are only available for 13 and above. But there's a few things you could actually do without an Apple ID. And so, yes, I mean, iTunesU Course Manager can definitely be, I can definitely see that being used in a primary school environment, I think. Next question, can anyone set up an iTunesU course? Yes. As an individual, you are able to sign up for iTunesU, for iTunesU Course Manager. So again, go to apple.com/UK/education, and in the iTunesU section, you find on the top of the screen a link as an individual to sign up for iTunesU. So I will take another question, so the last question, because we're running out of time. So the last question is, can anyone use the OU open resources in their own iTunesU public or private course? Again, anything you find on the public directory basically in iTunesU, you should be able to use. Typically, institutions or providers would give an indication on the copyrights. So you might want to check if the content has any specific remarks on that. So for example, if it's Creative Commons, then you should definitely be able to use that. Even if it's copyrighted and it's a public material, you should be able to point to it. And again, you can directly use or should be able to use that material in your own course. And it's a very good idea to look at what's available. But again, please make sure that the content has the appropriate rights for you to be used. And maybe if not, I'm sure that you can get in touch with the owner of the content in order to make sure that if they are comfortable in you using that. Right, with that, we are done with the Q&A session. So again, I want to thank our guest speakers today, Liz and Nick from the Open University. Also, Pete and Caroline, thanks for coming and for presenting the iTunes bit today, and thanks everyone for answering the questions as well. Again, I think it was a very engaging presentation. Just to remind everyone, this webcast is being recorded, and it will be available on demand in a few days. We will be notifying everyone who has subscribed to this webcast, so you will be able to enjoy the recording of that in due course. Finally, I want to thank you, the audience, as well, for joining us and for your fantastic questions. We had a few questions today which were really interesting and good. And I hope that you will be able to join us for our next webcast, which is actually happening next week on Wednesday, April 24th, at the same time at 4:30 p.m. UK time. So that would be 5:30 Central European time in case you're joining us from abroad from Central Europe. So thank you again, everyone, for joining, and have a great day.